It was a bright Saturday afternoon in a quiet neighborhood where the streets were alive with families enjoying the weekend. Children ran across sidewalks laughing, neighbors chatted on porches, and the faint aroma of food from local vendors floated in the air. Regina had just finished her shift at the local hospital. She was tired but happy to finally have a moment to herself after a long week of caring for patients. With her young daughter holding her hand, she walked down the familiar streets toward home. Her daughter, energetic and curious, kept pointing at everything she saw: flowers, street signs, and even the neighborhood dogs chasing each other around. Regina smiled softly, feeling grateful for these small moments of normalcy. As they turned a corner near a small park, a police car slowly pulled up beside them. The officer stepped out and walked toward Regina. His uniform was crisp, and he carried himself with the authority that often comes with the job. But his expression was stern, almost impatient. Regina stopped in her tracks, holding her daughter a little closer. She didn't want any trouble, but something about the officer made her uneasy. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his tone sharp. "I need to ask you a few questions." Regina nodded politely but cautiously. "Of course, officer." "Is there a problem?" He didn't answer directly. Instead, he stepped closer and reached toward her. Regina instinctively took a small step back, holding her daughter protectively. "Please don't touch me," she said calmly but firmly. The officer ignored her warning and repeated that he needed to check her ID. Regina felt a surge of panic. Her heart raced. She had done nothing wrong, and yet here she was being stopped and touched by someone who had power over her. She could feel her daughter's small hand gripping hers tightly, sensing her mother's tension. Regina's mind raced with questions. Why was this happening? What had she done? A few bystanders had begun to notice the scene. Some were curious, glancing at their phones, while others murmured quietly to each other. Regina tried to remain calm, taking deep breaths, but every instinct in her body screamed at her to protect herself and her child. "I haven't done anything wrong," she said again, hoping the officer would listen. The officer muttered something about police procedure and continued to insist on touching her. Regina froze. She could feel her cheeks heating up, not just from fear but from humiliation. She was a grown woman, a professional, someone who had spent her life helping others, and yet here she was, being treated as if she were suspicious simply for walking down the street. Her daughter, sensing the tension, began to tug at her hand nervously. Regina bent slightly to reassure her. "It's okay, baby. Just stay close to me," she whispered softly. At that moment, across the street, Malik was returning from a charity event he had attended earlier in the day. He was well known in the community, respected for his work with veterans and local youth programs. He had served in the military and had built strong relationships with local authorities, though he rarely used his influence unless absolutely necessary. As he approached the corner, he noticed a small crowd gathering and immediately felt a pang of concern. His eyes quickly found Regina and his daughter. He saw the officer standing too close to her, reaching out. Malik's heart skipped a beat. Without hesitation, he walked toward them, his presence calm but commanding. The crowd seemed to notice him as well, some stepping back to make way. Regina hadn't noticed him yet. She was still focused on the officer. The officer, on the other hand, turned toward Malik as he approached. There was a brief moment of confusion on the officer's face. He didn't recognize the man calmly striding toward him, and for a second, his authoritative demeanor faltered. Malik kept his voice steady but firm. "Officer, please step back." "You are touching my wife," he said clearly, his eyes locked on the man's. Regina looked up in relief as she recognized her husband. She felt her body relax slightly, though the fear hadn't completely left. Her daughter, sensing her mother's relief, hugged her tightly. The officer hesitated, clearly unsure of what to do next. Malik continued, explaining calmly that he and Regina had done nothing wrong. He mentioned that he had worked with the local police department on various initiatives and that they were known to him. The officer's face shifted from confusion to sudden realization. He had no idea who he was dealing with. The power dynamic had changed instantly, and the officer's posture became noticeably less aggressive. Malik didn't yell or threaten him, but his calm presence made it clear that he was serious. The crowd, which had been quietly observing, began whispering among themselves. Phones were raised, recording the interaction. Malik moved closer to Regina and her daughter. guiding them gently to a safer spot on the sidewalk. He ensured that his wife and child were out of immediate reach while he addressed the officer directly. Regina watched, a mix of emotions swirling inside her. She was angry at what had happened, scared that it could have gone further, and relieved that Malik was there to step in. She knew this could have been worse. She had seen stories on the news, heard about people being mistreated by those in power, and she realized how quickly an innocent situation could escalate if no one intervened. The officer, now visibly shaken, muttered an apology. His voice was quieter than before, and there was an awkward tension in the air. Malik didn't respond immediately. He looked at the officer steadily, ensuring that his presence alone reminded the man of the seriousness of his actions. After a moment, he nodded. "Apologies are a start, but actions matter more," he said calmly. Regina finally took a deep breath, still holding her daughter's hand. She felt a sense of gratitude toward Malik for handling the situation with such composure. She had feared that confrontation might escalate into something dangerous, but Malik's approach had prevented that. She looked around at the neighbors who had watched, some nodding in support, others murmuring quietly to each other about what they had witnessed. The family began to walk away slowly, Malik leading the way to ensure they were safe. Regina felt her heart slowly settle, though the tension remained. She knew that the incident would stay with her for a while. Even though no physical harm had been done, the emotional impact of being treated unjustly lingered. She thought about how many women might face similar situations without anyone there to step in. As they moved down the street, Malik gently squeezed her hand. "It's over for now," he said softly. "We'll handle the rest later." Regina nodded, grateful for his presence and his calmness. Her daughter, still holding her mother's hand, looked up at Malik with wide eyes, sensing that something serious had just happened. The crowd slowly dispersed, but a few bystanders lingered, sharing videos of the encounter on social media. Regina realized that their story might reach far beyond their neighborhood, perhaps even sparking conversations about respect, authority, and the treatment of ordinary people by those in power. She felt a mix of apprehension and hope. Apprehension because of what had happened, and hope because of the possibility that speaking out might prevent similar situations in the future. As they reached home, Regina reflected on the day. What had started as an ordinary afternoon had turned into a moment that reminded her of both the fragility and the resilience of everyday life. She hugged her daughter tightly, feeling grateful that they were safe. Malik stood beside them, quietly observing, always vigilant, always protective. Regina knew that they would have to deal with the aftermath, the discussions, the formal complaints, the emotional processing, but for now, she allowed herself a small moment of relief. The sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood, and for the first time in what felt like hours, she felt a sense of calm returning. Though shaken, she also felt a sense of determination. She understood now more than ever that being aware, being composed, and having someone to step in could make all the difference. It was a lesson she would carry with her for a long time, not just for herself, but for her daughter, for her family, and for everyone who might face similar moments of fear and uncertainty. After the tense encounter on the street, Regina and her daughter had barely settled back into their home when the weight of what had just happened began to hit them. Regina could still feel the officer's hand reaching toward her, the humiliation of being treated as if she were guilty of something she hadn't done. Her daughter, though too young to fully understand, clung tightly to her mother, asking questions with innocent curiosity. "Why did the man touch you, Mommy?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. Regina knelt down to meet her daughter's eyes, brushing her hair gently out of her face. "Sometimes people make mistakes," she said, keeping her voice calm so she wouldn't scare her. "But Mommy and Daddy will always make sure you are safe." Regina's mind, however, was racing. She couldn't stop thinking about the officer's behavior and the way he had assumed she was suspicious just because she was walking with her daughter. She had always known that people could judge too quickly, but experiencing it firsthand was jarring. She sat on the couch, her daughter nestled beside her, and tried to steady her thoughts. Meanwhile, Malik was pacing the living room, thinking carefully about the next steps. He knew this wasn't something that could just be ignored. An incident like this could have long-term effects, not just for Regina and their daughter, but for the community as a whole. Malik had already contacted a few close friends in the city who were familiar with local law enforcement. He wanted to ensure that everything was documented properly. While the officer had apologized in the moment, Malik understood that apologies alone were not enough to prevent future incidents. He wanted accountability, a clear record that would protect his family and possibly prevent someone else from going through a similar experience. Regina watched him work, admiring his composure. He never raised his voice, never let anger dictate his actions, but his determination was clear. Later that evening, Malik called the police department directly. He requested to speak with a supervisor about the incident. His voice was firm but polite as he recounted what had happened, emphasizing that while he appreciated the officer's eventual apology, the initial actions were inappropriate and concerning. The supervisor, taken aback by Malik's calm but authoritative tone, promised to review the situation and follow up. Malik also insisted that the conversation be documented thoroughly. He knew that paperwork and proper channels were important when dealing with institutional mistakes. While Malik handled the phone calls, Regina began to reflect on how much courage it had taken just to remain calm on the street. She remembered the fear she felt when the officer first reached out to touch her, the adrenaline that made her body tense, and the instinct to protect her daughter at all costs. In that moment, she realized how quickly ordinary life could be disrupted, how vulnerable anyone could feel when authority was misused. Yet she also saw the importance of calm reasoning and the support of loved ones. Without Malik stepping in, the situation might have escalated in ways she couldn't have predicted. The next morning, Regina decided to take a walk in the neighborhood to clear her mind. She noticed the same street where the incident had occurred, now quiet and seemingly ordinary. Children were playing, vendors were setting up their stalls, and the sun cast a warm glow on the pavement. But Regina's memories of the day before made her see the street differently. She could no longer take safety for granted, and she realized how important it was to teach her daughter awareness without instilling fear. As they walked, a few neighbors recognized Regina and approached her.
"Are you okay?"
One asked gently. Regina smiled faintly, grateful for the concern. She explained briefly that there had been an uncomfortable encounter with a police officer, but reassured them that she and her daughter were safe. The neighbors listened, nodding and offering words of support. Some shared their own stories of misunderstandings with authorities, and Regina realized that her experience, while upsetting, was part of a larger pattern that many people faced silently every day. Meanwhile, Malik continued to monitor the situation closely. He spoke with legal advisors and community leaders to ensure that the incident would be addressed responsibly. He emphasized that the goal wasn't to punish the officer personally, but to create a system where such actions wouldn't happen again. Malik's approach was deliberate. He wanted to transform a negative experience into something constructive, to educate the department and the community about respect, boundaries, and the importance of accountability. As the day passed, Regina tried to focus on her work at home. She had small tasks to finish, bills to organize, and chores that demanded her attention. Yet her mind often wandered back to the street, to the moment when she felt powerless and to the way Malik had calmly intervened. She thought about the mixture of fear and relief that had coursed through her that afternoon. She realized that those emotions were normal, that acknowledging them was important for her own healing. That evening, Malik sat down with Regina and their daughter for dinner. The atmosphere was quieter than usual, reflective. They spoke about the events of the previous day in a way that was honest but gentle, especially for their daughter. Malik explained that sometimes people make mistakes even when they shouldn't, and that standing up for oneself is important. Regina added that being safe doesn't always mean avoiding people, but knowing how to act calmly and wisely in difficult situations. Together they turned a scary experience into a lesson for their daughter, teaching her about courage, composure, and family support. Later that week, Malik received a call from the police department. The supervisor had reviewed the situation and assured him that the officer would receive additional training on proper conduct and sensitivity, and that the incident would be formally documented. Malik listened carefully, asking questions and ensuring that the department understood the impact of their officer's actions. He knew that a real resolution required both acknowledgement of the mistake and practical steps to prevent it from happening again. Regina, meanwhile, decided to reach out to her community. She shared her experience at a local women's group meeting, speaking openly about her feelings and the importance of boundaries and respect. Her words resonated with many, and soon, other women began sharing their stories. The room, filled with voices and experiences, became a space of understanding, learning, and empowerment. Regina realized that her own vulnerability had sparked something meaningful, that by speaking up she was helping others feel less alone. As the days turned into weeks, the family slowly returned to a sense of normalcy. The memory of the incident lingered, but it was no longer a source of fear. Instead, it became a reminder of the importance of vigilance, calmness, and advocacy. Malik and Regina continued to support each other, reinforcing the idea that in moments of uncertainty, presence, reason, and courage make all the difference. Regina's daughter, too, learned small but important lessons about standing close to those who love and protect you, about observing the world carefully, and about the power of calm confidence. Even at her young age, she began to understand that safety often comes from preparation, awareness, and the support of family. By the end of Part 2, the family had not only survived the encounter, but had started transforming it into a meaningful experience. They had taken steps to address the wrongdoing, educate the community, and ensure that their voices were heard. The incident, while frightening, became a turning point in their lives, shaping the way they interacted with the world and reinforcing the values of respect, responsibility, and care for one another. After the incident and the initial conversations with the police department, Malik and Regina tried to get back to their normal routines, but the memory of that tense afternoon lingered in their minds. Regina still felt the mix of fear and frustration that had flooded her when the officer had reached out to touch her. She often found herself replaying the moment in her mind, wondering how easily the situation could have turned worse if Malik hadn't arrived when he did. Malik, too, was thinking about the event constantly. He had seen enough in his life to know that sometimes authority could be misused, even unintentionally. That day had reminded him of the importance of speaking up, standing firm, and protecting family and community. He had always believed in justice and calm action, and now more than ever he felt that these values were essential. One morning, Malik decided to go back to the street where it had happened. He wanted to see the area with his own eyes, to understand the environment, and to consider how future incidents could be prevented. Regina and their daughter joined him. As they walked down the familiar sidewalk, Malik noticed small things he hadn't paid attention to before. The way shadows fell across the pavement, the blind spots near the corner where the officer had first approached Regina, and the location of nearby neighbors' homes. He knew that understanding these details could help others stay safer and be aware of their surroundings. Regina walked quietly beside him, her daughter holding her hand. She felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. The street that had seemed ordinary before now felt charged with memories. She remembered the officer's impatience, the way his hand had reached toward her without permission, and the moment Malik had calmly intervened. She felt grateful, of course, but she also realized how vulnerable people could be in everyday situations. As they continued their walk, Malik noticed a few neighbors watching them curiously. Some had seen the viral video of the encounter, which had been shared widely online. Malik greeted them politely, and a few stepped forward to speak. They wanted to know how Regina was doing, if she felt safe, and what steps were being taken to ensure this didn't happen to anyone else. Malik answered carefully, explaining that they were taking action through proper channels, documenting everything, and speaking with community leaders and law enforcement officials. He emphasized that their goal was not revenge, but education and prevention. Regina listened quietly, thinking about how important it was to have community support. She realized that fear often diminishes when people come together, when voices are heard, and when lessons are shared. Even though the experience had been frightening, she felt a small sense of relief knowing that their story could help others. She looked at her daughter, who was listening attentively, and felt the responsibility to turn this incident into a teaching moment about calmness, courage, and awareness. Later that day, Malik received a message from the police department. The officer who had confronted Regina had been called in for a meeting with his superiors. Malik understood that this was a necessary step, not only to address the specific incident but also to prevent similar misunderstandings in the future. The department wanted to ensure that officers received proper training on interacting respectfully with the public. Malik appreciated the response but remained cautiously observant. He knew that real change required more than words. It required action and follow-through. Regina, meanwhile, focused on her work at home. She tried to immerse herself in everyday tasks, but her mind often drifted back to the encounter. She remembered the moment she had felt powerless, and she also remembered the calm and measured way Malik had intervened. She realized that courage doesn't always mean loud confrontation. Sometimes it's about being firm, steady, and clear in the way you respond to danger or injustice. That evening, Malik and Regina sat down together to plan how they would move forward. They wanted to ensure that their daughter could grow up with an understanding of both respect for authority and awareness of her own rights. They discussed ways to approach potentially difficult situations calmly, how to assert boundaries without escalating tension, and the importance of relying on support from loved ones when needed. Their daughter listened, asking questions in her innocent way, and they answered carefully, wanting to teach her resilience without instilling fear. In the days that followed, Malik also reached out to a few local community leaders. He explained the incident, focusing on the importance of proper conduct and community safety. He stressed that while the officer had apologized, broader lessons needed to be learned to ensure that similar situations did not occur again. The leaders listened attentively, acknowledging that awareness, education, and sensitivity were critical components in maintaining trust between residents and authorities. Regina, feeling empowered by the steps Malik was taking, began sharing her experience with close friends. She spoke openly about the emotions she had felt, fear, anger, confusion, but also about the relief and support that came from having Malik there. Sharing her story helped her process the event and, she realized, might help others in her community who had faced similar situations quietly. Meanwhile, the officer who had confronted Regina was attending his sensitivity and conduct training. He reviewed his actions, reflecting on what had gone wrong and how his behavior had affected the family. The department emphasized that understanding boundaries, communication, and the impact of one's actions was essential. The officer began to see the gravity of the situation from a perspective he hadn't considered before. It wasn't just about following procedure. It was about respecting the dignity and safety of the people he was sworn to protect. As the week progressed, Malik continued to check in with the police department and community leaders. He wanted to ensure that the promises made during meetings were being carried out. He also stayed close to Regina and their daughter, providing reassurance and continuing to guide them through the emotional aftermath. He understood that healing from such an experience took time, and that being proactive and supportive was crucial. Regina found strength in small moments, watching her daughter play safely in the yard, enjoying quiet walks together and seeing the community respond positively. Each day the fear she had felt began to lessen, replaced by a sense of determination. She realized that their story had the potential to create awareness and inspire change. Even though the incident had been painful, it had also brought clarity about the importance of vigilance, family support, and community engagement. Malik and Regina also discussed ways to contribute more actively to their neighborhood. They planned workshops on safety, awareness, and respectful interactions, aiming to educate both residents and young people. They wanted to transform a negative experience into something constructive, to ensure that others could benefit from the lessons they had learned firsthand. One afternoon, as they walked through their neighborhood again, they noticed children playing, neighbors greeting each other, and life continuing with a sense of normalcy. Yet Regina could not help but remember the previous tension. She reflected on how quickly ordinary moments could be disrupted, and how important it was to handle situations with calmness, wisdom, and support. She felt grateful for Malik's presence, realizing that his intervention had prevented the incident from escalating into something far worse. Their daughter, learning from their example, began understanding subtle lessons about safety and awareness. She noticed the small ways her parents paid attention to their surroundings and the calm way they responded to challenges. Though young, she began to internalize these behaviors, learning that composure, vigilance, and careful action were important tools in navigating the world. By the end of Part 3, the family had not only processed the immediate aftermath of the incident, but had started turning it into an opportunity for growth and education. Malik and Regina were more attentive, more deliberate in their actions, and more determined to support each other and their community. The officer involved was learning the impact of his behavior, and the department was taking steps to prevent similar situations. The incident had been frightening and unsettling, but it had also sparked important conversations, strengthened family bonds, and highlighted the value of calm, measured action in the face of fear. For Regina, Malik, and their daughter, life was returning to normal, but with a renewed sense of awareness, responsibility, and resilience. After the incident and the initial discussions with the police department, Malik and Regina could finally take a moment to breathe. But even with the immediate danger behind them, the weight of what had happened was still heavy. Regina often found herself replaying the moment in her mind. The fear she felt, the officer reaching toward her, and the relief when Malik stepped in. It was a mix of emotions she couldn't shake, and she realized that healing would take more than just time. Malik, noticing her unease, sat down with her one evening in their living room. "We've done everything we can for now," he said gently. "The department has acknowledged what happened and they are taking steps. The officer is receiving training and the situation is documented. That's a start." Regina nodded, though she still felt a knot of worry in her chest. She knew that apologies and promises were just the beginning. What mattered most was action. Action that ensured this wouldn't happen again, either to her or anyone else. In the following days, Malik and Regina started receiving updates from the police department. The officer involved had been called in for meetings with his superiors to review his conduct and discuss proper interaction with the public. Malik was careful to follow up with the department, ensuring that the process was thorough and transparent. He wanted to make sure that lessons were learned and that there would be consequences if proper behavior was not followed. Regina, meanwhile, began sharing her experience more widely. She spoke at local women's gatherings and neighborhood meetings, explaining not just what had happened, but how important it was for everyone to know their rights and understand personal boundaries. Her story resonated with many people who had faced similar situations quietly, afraid to speak up. Her courage inspired others to share their experiences, creating a dialogue in the community about respect, awareness, and accountability. As these conversations grew, Malik realized that the impact of the incident was broader than just their family. It had sparked a discussion about authority, responsibility, and respect. Community leaders began inviting him to meetings, asking for his perspective on how situations like this could be prevented in the future. Malik emphasized the need for training, clear communication, and awareness among officers. He stressed that mistakes often happen because of assumptions, and that preventing harm required careful, intentional action. One afternoon, Malik received a call from a community organization that had seen the viral video of the incident. They wanted to meet with him and Regina to discuss how their story could be used to educate others. Malik agreed immediately, understanding the importance of turning a negative experience into something constructive. He and Regina met with a small group of leaders in a local community center. They shared their story, answered questions, and discussed strategies for teaching others about safety, respect, and boundaries. The meeting was calm, but filled with purpose, and Malik felt a sense of hope growing. Meanwhile, Regina noticed changes in the way her neighbors interacted with her and her daughter. People were more aware, more considerate. Conversations about respect and safety were happening more openly in the community. Regina found comfort in these small changes. She realized that even though the incident had been frightening, it had led to awareness and positive action. Back at the police department, the officer who had confronted Regina was reflecting on his actions. The meetings with his superiors were intense, focusing on understanding the impact of his behavior and learning how to interact respectfully with the public. The officer admitted that he had acted hastily, allowing assumptions to guide his actions. The department emphasized the importance of training, communication, and personal accountability. The officer began to understand that his actions, though perhaps unintentional, could have serious consequences for those he was meant to protect. At home, Malik and Regina continued to focus on healing and growth. They spent quality time with their daughter, teaching her through example how to act with confidence, calmness, and awareness in potentially difficult situations. They also continued to discuss broader lessons about community, respect, and standing up for oneself and others. Their home became a place not just of safety, but of learning and empowerment. As the days turned into weeks, Regina noticed a shift in herself. She felt stronger, more confident in handling difficult situations. She realized that her fear from the initial incident had not disappeared, but she had learned how to manage it. She was no longer paralyzed by the thought of authority figures. Instead, she felt empowered to speak up when necessary, while maintaining calm and composure. Malik, observing Regina's growth, felt a sense of pride. He had always believed in the power of calm, steady action, and now he saw its effect not just on his wife but on the community. He understood that true change required patience, understanding, and persistence. By addressing the situation thoughtfully and deliberately, he had helped not only his family, but also set an example for others in their neighborhood. One afternoon, Malik and Regina decided to organize a small community gathering in their neighborhood park. They invited neighbors, local leaders, and even some representatives from the police department. The purpose was simple: to discuss community safety, respect, and proper interaction between residents and authorities. The event was casual but meaningful. People shared stories, asked questions, and offered suggestions. Malik spoke about the importance of accountability and awareness, while Regina emphasized the value of calmness and assertiveness in challenging situations. Their daughter, observing quietly, smiled as she watched her parents guide the conversation with patience and clarity. The community gathering was a turning point. People left feeling informed, empowered, and more connected. Malik and Regina realized that while their family had faced a frightening experience, it had sparked a wave of awareness and dialogue that might prevent similar situations in the future. They felt proud not because of the incident itself, but because of the positive actions it had inspired. In the weeks that followed, Malik continued to follow up with the police department. He wanted to ensure that the training and accountability measures were implemented effectively. He also encouraged the department to continue engaging with the community, fostering trust and understanding. Regina, meanwhile, continued her outreach efforts, speaking to groups and individuals about safety, respect, and empowerment. She found that sharing her story not only helped others, but also aided in her own healing process. As time went on, the family began to feel a renewed sense of normalcy. Life returned to a routine filled with small joys: evening walks, family meals, and playtime with their daughter. Yet they carried the lessons of the incident with them. They were more vigilant, more aware, and more committed to speaking up when necessary. They understood that fear could be transformed into strength, and that difficult experiences could be opportunities for growth and education. By the end of Part 4, the officer had received proper training, the community had engaged in meaningful dialogue, and Malik and Regina had turned a frightening encounter into a catalyst for awareness and empowerment. The family had not only protected themselves, but had contributed to a broader sense of safety and respect within their neighborhood. The experience, while unsettling, had led to constructive action, stronger family bonds, and a renewed sense of confidence and purpose. Regina often reflected on the journey. She knew that moments of fear and uncertainty were a part of life, but she had learned that how one responds mattered more than the situation itself. With Malik by her side, calm, steady, and supportive, she felt equipped to face challenges with composure and courage. Together, they had not only protected themselves but had inspired others to act thoughtfully and responsibly. The family's story became a quiet example in the neighborhood, a reminder that even in moments of fear, calm action, courage, and a focus on solutions could make all the difference. It was a story of resilience, awareness, and empowerment, one that would stay with them and their community for years to come. Weeks had passed since the incident that had shaken Regina and her family. The initial shock and fear had gradually faded, replaced by reflection, understanding, and a stronger sense of purpose. The family had gone through a difficult experience, but they had also found ways to turn it into an opportunity for growth, learning, and connection. Regina often thought about that tense afternoon when the officer had touched her, the fear that had coursed through her body, and the relief she felt when Malik had calmly stepped in. It was a moment she would never forget, but now it felt different. It was no longer just a memory of fear. It was a reminder of resilience. Regina's daughter had also started to understand some of the lessons the family had learned. She was young, but she could sense the seriousness of what had happened and the care her parents had shown in protecting her. She watched Malik and Regina closely, noticing the calm, deliberate way they approached situations and how they communicated with others. Even in small ways, she was learning about courage, awareness, and how to stand up for herself and others when needed. The family had turned a frightening experience into a teaching moment, and the lessons were slowly becoming a part of their daily lives. Malik continued to take proactive steps to ensure the situation was addressed fully. He stayed in touch with the police department to confirm that the officer involved had completed his training and that proper accountability measures were in place. Malik emphasized to the department that mistakes like this could have serious consequences, and that proper conduct and respect were not optional. They were necessary for trust between residents and authorities. The department had acknowledged this and promised to implement ongoing sensitivity training for all officers. Malik felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that their efforts had led to real action. Regina, on her part, had become more active in the community. She shared her story with local women's groups, schools, and neighborhood gatherings, always focusing on the importance of awareness, personal boundaries, and calm assertiveness. Her story resonated with many, and she found that people began to feel empowered by hearing how she and Malik had handled the situation. She encouraged discussions, asked questions, and helped others think about how they could protect themselves and respond calmly to difficult situations. Her voice became a quiet but powerful influence in the community, showing that even one incident, when addressed thoughtfully, could lead to greater understanding. One afternoon, the family decided to host a small community event in their neighborhood park. They invited neighbors, local leaders, and representatives from the police department. The goal was simple: to discuss safety, respect, and communication between residents and authorities. The event was casual but filled with meaningful conversations. People shared their own experiences, asked questions, and learned from each other. Malik spoke about the importance of calm action and thoughtful communication. Regina emphasized personal awareness, boundaries, and teaching children how to navigate potentially challenging situations safely. Their daughter listened quietly, occasionally asking small questions, absorbing the lessons in her own innocent way. The event was a turning point for the neighborhood. Residents left feeling informed, empowered, and connected. Many expressed gratitude to Malik and Regina for sharing their story and turning a personal incident into a broader lesson for the community. Conversations about respect, safety, and awareness became more common in the streets, the homes, and even in local schools. The family had managed to transform fear into education and empowerment, and that ripple effect continued to grow. As the weeks turned into months, life gradually returned to a sense of normalcy for Regina and her family. The initial fear and tension had faded, but the lessons remained. Regina found that she could walk through the neighborhood with confidence, knowing that she had the skills, knowledge, and support to handle challenges calmly. She felt stronger, more aware, and more capable of protecting herself and her loved ones. Malik observed these changes in her and felt proud. Their shared experience had strengthened their bond, reinforcing trust, understanding, and teamwork. The officer who had confronted Regina had completed his training and had been held accountable for his actions. The department had implemented new guidelines for respectful interaction with residents, emphasizing awareness, communication, and sensitivity. While the incident had started with a moment of fear and misunderstanding, it had resulted in tangible improvements, not just for Regina's family, but for the community as a whole. Malik and Regina felt a sense of quiet satisfaction, knowing that their experience had led to positive change. Regina often reflected on the journey they had been through. She realized that fear, while natural, did not have to define her actions or her life. What mattered was how she responded, the choices she made in the moment, and the support she had from loved ones. Malik's calm and measured intervention had been crucial, but it was also their combined efforts afterward. The HOA